TL Turner here. It's approximately 8:11 p.m. Central Standard Time, 9:11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and 8:11 a.m. Indochina time. We're already Thursday, April 17th. In the States, we're April 16th. Now, in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about modern economics and have a conversation that when I was in high school, I would never imagine myself having. I had the opportunity to take AP history in high school, and up until that point, I really hated the idea of history. The common saying, history always repeats itself. I don't believe that history repeats itself. I do, however, believe that history gives us clues on how to approach the present and the future, but I don't believe that history repeats itself. I digress. I had a teacher in high school that totally changed my mind about studying history and caused me to fall in love with studying history. And I went on to take AP World History, African American history, of course, and art history. And a part of the conversation that we're going to talk about today is just having a conversation around money and modern econ. And we're going to talk mostly about the banking system. This overview of topics could easily be a 12 to 15-hour lecture. Not going to make you stick around for 15 hours tonight on the channel. However, I do want to cover a couple topics that we've been really diving into as far as my clients that I help with one-on-one, and then also just students that come through the program. Now, one of the things I like to share, because it's common to want to know where somebody's interest in money came from or where their interest in trading came from. And I like to share the story of when I was a kid. Around the ages of 9, I was in the gifted and talented program. I went to a school called Pulaski Heights Elementary, and we had a business week. Ironically, we had a business week, and during that business week, we all got in our groups, partnerships, and started various businesses. And some people had a jewelry business, and some people had a auto mechanic shop, and some people sold books. Some people did this, and so me and my partner, PJ, decided that we were going to be the bank. We called it Emerald City Bank. Shout out to the Wiz. And so one day, one of our friends that had the jewelry store had made these cool necklaces. I don't remember the type of beads we used to use back in the day, but we used to do the latex beaded stuff, and they had some bracelets and stuff like that. And I went to PJ. I was like, I think we're out of money, man. He was like, are we? And I was like, let's just make some more. He was like, we can do that, and I was like, who's gonna tell us that we can? And so that's always an interesting thing, just to realize that at a very young age, we cracked the money system and really understood money from a different level, especially when it comes to fiat money. And so a little bit of that insatiable desire for learning is what we're going to use as a foundation for what we're going to be talking about this evening. But won't cover all 6 topics that you see on your screen. This is something, if you would like a copy of the study guide, you can definitely visit the billionairetradingclub.com to get that free study guide. Now, really wanted to focus in on the banking system because right now a lot of uncertainty is the word that we'll continue to hear. Uncertainty, unprecedented things are happening in the banking system, and I would like to take this opportunity to give you an idea of my opinion of how banks actually work. Because what we traditionally think when it comes to banks, let's just say a person walks into a local bank, Emerald City Bank, and they're wanting to take out a loan to start a business or to buy a car or to buy a house. Right now, loans are based on credit worthiness, aka your ability to manage previous debt. So not always is that loan decision made based on existing deposits. So what do you mean? You could walk into Emerald City Bank not having an account with us, and potentially based on your history of managing your previous debt qualify for a loan under our terms. Now, the common saying of people believing that banks use OPM or other people's money. Banks don't use OPM. They literally create their own money by issuing deposits. It's literally the stroke of a keyboard. So meaning they'll say, "Hey, customer, Mr. John Hengelsmith, you do qualify based on your credit worthiness. We're going to plus 25,000 into your account, and we're going to minus 25,000 on our end. But in turn, what they've just done is created an asset for themselves and a liability for Mr. John Jingleheimer Smith. Yes. So even though we have this idea that banks are using other people's money when it comes to fractional reserve banking, we'll get to that in just a second. But this idea that banks use other people's money is really an outdated idea because they just hit a button. Talking a little bit about credit worthiness, I mean, the whole credit system just needing a rehaul, knowing that there are predatory lending practices that make it difficult to pay off the amount of debt. Like, for instance, right now, common interest rates on credit cards are in the 30%, no matter if you do have that proverbial perfect credit score or if you are in the lower end of the credit score. Right now, even I've had clients that have had 550s and clients that have had 725s, and for whatever reason, the interest rate on that credit card is pretty much 29, 30%. And so this idea of the banks creating assets for themselves and creating liabilities for their borrowers, they're really just IOUs essentially. The person that is borrowing is saying, I owe you for me being extended this keyboard entry into an account that's fugazi in a certain opinion, right? So this idea that the loan repayment, what happens when that person has made the point of paying that loan off? Let's say they took out a 5-year loan and they pay that loan back. Well, if we go back to the history of money, when the tally stick was a system to record and document transactions, what it really told us is during that medieval time, it was a kind of debt that could be traded freely. And what would happen is once these tally sticks were broken apart and the person would come back to pay their taxes, that money would be burned. And so essentially, nothing is new under the sun when that person comes and repays this keyboard entry of the loan that the bank extended to them. Poof, that money disappears. And that's why a lot of people believe that banks need regulation because they have an unlimited ability to be able to create money. I had a client years ago that would ask me about credit cards, and they're like, "Well, how do they just have all this endless money to say, well, I can give you a $5,000 credit line, or I can give you a $10,000 credit line, or I can give you a 25,000 credit line." They're just making it up. And as we said previously, it's an asset for them for you to pay that back because they're getting paid back off of that interest. And that is why our systems are the way that they are, and having this conversation of panic and fear and all of those things. So just circling back to the concept of fractional reserve banking, most people believe right now under the fractional reserve banking method that banks keep 10% of whatever they deposit. So for instance, if to the bank and I was gonna say if I deposit 10,000, but we know that's some people don't like to deposit right at 10,000 because there's forms that go out and banks do all of this communication. So maybe they're depositing $9,999. I'm not saying to do that, but let's just take that $10,000 figure. Most people believe that if they go to the bank under the fractional reserve banking system, deposit 10,000, that typically banks are keeping 10% of that on their books, or AKA $1,000. What we're really seeing now, especially with the influx of banks that are literally shutting down, is that banks have lowered the reserve down to 3 or 5%. So in that same instance, instead of when I deposit $10,000, that bank keeping 10%, they're actually keeping about 3 to 5 or $300 to $500 on hand, and in turn, they're actually lending more than they have in the reserves, which causes this cycle, this vicious cycle of panics and bank runs. There's an article on the website that we did that listed out the various financial crises over hundreds of years and how all of those just led up to just this system. How it's working and how it's broken and how it can be fixed. But at the same time, it's like we're still operating under this idea of fiat money. And one day we'll maybe have that conversation and we'll all come together and realize that we've been played. But until then, what do you think? I mean, were you aware that banks changed what they were keeping on hand? They dropped it down to about 3 to 5%. Were you aware of that? And what do you think is the next idea for how we can evolve in our way of exchanging with each other. I don't think that going back to a barter system will be the way of the future. I do think that there is a combination of this meme coin cryptocurrency transaction where people can create their own currencies and then exchange them among their communities. That could be a possible solution. But until we figure out what's happening in the economy with the tariffs and all of this, I mean, until then, everything is just up for discussion. So definitely want to know your thoughts. If this video gave you an aha moment, would love to hear about it. You can find my email in the description below. I do respond to the email, so feel free to reach out with any feedback that you have. And if you have a study of modern economics and real money from a new age perspective. So until the next time, take care and trade safe.